Okay, before I get into this, let me just say we're going to cruise through these two chapters here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the ending, or we're going to look at the epilogue here a little bit. Read that. Just trying to look through all this here that we got. It's quite a bit here, so we're going to see how much. This is probably going to be like an hour plus video. Like I say, yeah, we'll read the afterword a little bit. We'll read that. It's only about a page and a half worth, and then we'll end it there. And then I'll give y'all my brief thoughts if I'm awake enough, and then we're gonna call that good. So with that, let's do it. Chapter 17, Reflections in Prison. There was at least one good thing for me about being in Stadelheim. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no one watching. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No one watching. That's fine. I'm doing it for me, man. Like I say, I'm going to finish this book. If for nothing else, it's just for me. It's just for me. So that's all right. I understand what you're saying, man. There is at least one good thing about being in Stadelheim. After the upheavals of the past weeks, I had come to reflect and think about the future. These considerations were colored by the events immediately after 9 November 1923. I was deeply embittered at the betrayal and harbored hate and a desire for revenge against the traitors. But I was also full of confidence that in the end the Volkisch movement would triumph. As I write, 4 years have passed, and I now see things more calmly and soberly. I have gained certain insights which I give a clue to why many of my opponents acted as they did. Although it does not excuse them, everything that happens in the world does so for a purpose. Accordingly, it must be that if Germany is bound to the floor, those who serve her most faithfully must also sacrifice freedom and life. Karl may have been a tool of those forces which aim to do evil and finish up doing good. One thing is at least clear. Reflections on whether 8 November 1923 was a good thing or a bad thing are superfluous. It was bound to happen. On 17 November, I forwarded the following points to the court, which put over my argument cogently regarding the events of 8 and 9 November 1923. Whether Karl's action in suppressing with machine guns the attempt by Adolf Hitler to save the German people at their hour of greatest need was good or bad can only be determined in the eternally unerring annals of history. The illustrious champion of German freedom, Adolf Hitler, was not allowed to carry through his intention. Thus, we lack a yardstick to judge if his opening move would have signaled the rebirth of Germany. So to act it is. If it succeeds, the highest service of the fatherland; otherwise, high treason. We can leave it to the journalists to deliver judgment. Also to those clever, level-headed friends of Germany, who are also convinced by the weight of their own words that they consider it an outrage. Now they have nothing to fear. The Volkisch press, silence. Other newspapers print only what suits the government. The leaders of the freedom movement are behind bars to shut them up. One day, despite everything, truth will out, and the court, which must very soon render its judgment, must find sources to justify itself technically and morally. They will have to hear out those who today may not speak out publicly. The following observations are at the disposal of the court as a subjective statement by one of the accused. After recounting the events I have mentioned earlier, I ended my submission. I can see only one thing only, and have become certain of it behind prison walls. The best and purest, followed by the finest sons of our Volk, have, in the hour of the fatherland's greatest need, acted out of ardent love for the fatherland to pave the way for the liberation and salvation of Germany, for which, by the German people cry out. This act was put down bloodily with machine guns, deceit, and betrayal by those forces which over the last 5 years have proved their inability to lead us out of this misery, and who have now thrown the leaders of the liberation movement into jail. Candor, blind devotion to honesty and loyalty, and selfless, ardent love for the fatherland conflict with indecisiveness, breach of one's word, honor, and deceit, and treachery. And may it now please the court to pronounce its judgment before God and Volk. I also wrote an article called Savior of the Fatherland the following day. Some of the text must be deleted from this book so as not to infringe the law for the protection of the Republic. All gazettes declare that Kahr served the fatherland by suppressing the Hitler Putsch. They say so, and it must be so. Bourgeois people hasten to express their acclaim and gratitude for a national deed wherever they find a willing ear. In contrast, why should we consider the matter soberly and keep to the facts? Why did Hitler act? The November Revolution in 1918 robbed the victorious German armies of their success and caused the collapse of Germany. No Reich government nor the Kahr government in Bavaria has taken any action against the authors of this revolution. Therefore, those responsible for it remain anonymous, and men who approved it sit in the highest positions in Germany. 2. Germany was not responsible for the war. It is said that the most important of all questions is to place blame where it belongs. Has the Reich government or the Kahr government ever stated publicly that not Germany, but the Entente, and the Entente exclusively, was responsible for the war? Has any action been taken against the German signatories to the scandalous document of Versailles, which is based on the question of guilt? The peace treaty and the lie as to guilt hold good now as then. The signatories have not yet been brought to account. Besides the signatories of which were robbed by the Treaty of Versailles, we have also lost Upper Silesia, Rhineland, the Ruhr, and the Palatinate. Has any Reich government or the Kahr government done anything to get them back? Are not those who fought to regain Upper Silesia, Rhine, and Ruhr thanked for their services today by being betrayed and locked up? As the obvious outcome of peace and the policy of appeasement, a terrible emergency has ensnared our people. A large proportion is going hungry. For the scarcity of goods, which could have been foreseen, the Jewish exchange bears the primary guilt, and they cause the monetary misery artificially. Has any Reich government or the Kahr government taken any steps to confront the emergency with resolve? Are need and hunger being overcome? Is being taken care of to ensure that nobody lives in poverty and freezes? No. Millions are hungry and cannot afford fuel for the winter. Nothing has been done to alleviate the crisis. No solution ordered. Alongside the great shortages comes unemployment. It was just as easy to see it coming and take steps to fight it as was the economic disaster. It is working class Germany which has to bear the brunt. Has any Reich government or the Kahr government done anything to limit mass unemployment? In his book, Kriegführung und Politik, War Leadership and Politics, Ludendorff states it to be a misfortune that no effort was made to win over the workers for the nation. Has any government, especially that of Kahr, taken it upon itself to repair this oversight? Can one know the mood of the working classes just by reading ministerial reports? Hasn't the working man simply been driven into the hands of the Marxists and redacted leaders because nobody cared? Do we not have a duty to care for that man, to be his most loyal brother and friend, who fought and bled with us shoulder to shoulder at the front and was no worse than anyone else from any other level of society? Unemployment, which had to come, is here. Countless thousands of brave workers find themselves in the most grievous poverty, and cold winter is at the door. Racketeers, stock exchange speculators, deceivers of the people, profiteers, and hoarders remain masked in the face of despair, misery, and unemployment. They have the effrontery to live it up and carouse. The rabble which has stolen money from the productive classes parades itself in the streets and public places. The rabble has claimed the property of Germans, houses, estates, goods, and businesses which they could not hold on to by reason of the financial situation. Apart from the racketeers, it is primarily the redacted from all parts of the world who seize German property with a laugh. Practically nothing has been done to put a stop to these appalling circumstances. That the redacted tearing apart and breaking down Germany are incurring enormous responsibility is no longer doubted by any German. It is also clear that since the revolution in Germany, the redacted and their helpers have an extraordinary power base and are sucking the German people dry. Has any right government or the Kahr government taken decisive steps to liberate Germany from this redacted power and to make the guilty redacted answerable? This has nothing to do with the expulsion of Bavaria of a few Eastern redacted, which Kahr proposed and then decided not to, but the decontamination of redacted predominance. It is the redacted everywhere who are the danger, not just the Eastern redacted in Bavaria. The international pacifist contamination planned and nourished primarily by the redacted has become a serious danger for the people. If we are not successful in rooting out this disease, Germany will never rise again. Has any government or Kahr government ever aimed for the total eradication of the internationalist, Marxist, and pacifist idea? Has the rabble which is contaminating our people and affecting our brave working classes with their propaganda ever been disempowered? Is their every word, act, or writing in this direction suppressed? In the Reich, at the present time, naturally, nothing is being done to prevent it. In Bavaria, Kahr did ban the Marxist stormtroopers and the Münchener Post for a couple of days. True. But is this enough to prevent the danger? Is this the way to defeat world powers and their propaganda? These are just some of the burning questions which today confront Germany and within it Bavaria. And everywhere the answer to the question, what has been done and what will be done, is nothing. What has been done instead? The law for the protection of the Republic has been set aside in Bavaria. The Reich and Bavaria do not share the same laws. What has been done to convince the Reich to set aside this exceptional situation? General von Lossow dismissed the Reich government and is now Bavarian military governor, and Bavarian troops swear their oath to the Bavarian government. So in what are we living? Are we in Germany or in an autonomous Bavaria? The Reich Constitution no longer applies here, and what the Reich government thinks and orders does not apply to us. Very well. But what Reich government is recognized? Which Reich Constitution? Kahr said that Bavaria desires to resolve the German question. March on Berlin, he declares, and the pro-fatherland organizations blare at every opportunity. We must remain in the Reich. It is the whole of Germany rather than Bavaria which must be saved. We must not leave our redacted brothers in the north, south, east, and west in the greatest despair, in the lurch. We must fight today, not for the white-blue parochial interest, but for our great, glorious black, white, red Germany. Everybody is waiting for the act. This cannot be allowed to go on, and something must be done, are the cries of the people who look on with horror at our terrible distress, and see no salvation, but ever more chaos and ruin, and Hitler, a foreigner, dares to act. Lossow, Seisser, and even Kahr know it, for they inspired him. For weeks, Hitler said he would act and preached it. And, as if awoken from some dreadful nightmare, the German Volk in Munich rejoiced, did they not? This is going to take longer than I thought. We're going to go on. We're going to try to finish this up here today. Lord have mercy. I may have bitten off more than I can chew, as they say. Let me see here. This is a lot to take in. Yeah, this is okay. Yeah, this is a lot more than I thought. Okay, we're going to try here. Okay, we're going to try to keep going. Okay. Lost my place. That's why you normally hear the silence, just to let y'all know. The old rulers who carry so much guilt for how things have developed, were pushed aside, but no blood was spilled in his revolution. He did not say to Carr, "We shall repeat 7 November 1918, but offered him his hand. And he did not say to Sicer in May 1919, "You were a very clever man, for many of your comrades were not in the bad books of the Social Democrats, but instead promised him the post of commander of the German police." In the presence of Ludendorff, the great army leader Karl, Lossow, and Sicer offered the young leader of the Volk, Adolf Hitler, their hands and made public declarations to celebrate it. And Hitler believed them, trusted them, and assured them with a beaming smile, "Now we shall triumph in the struggle for Germany's liberation." Lossow, Sicer, and Karl went out and betrayed Hitler, the German freedom movement in Germany, and then Karl, committing the only act he ever went through with, secretly ordered the German Reichswehr and police to oppose German youth, and had Germans shooting Germans, and ordered frontline veterans to fire on the wartime commander-in-chief, General Ludendorff. The best German blood has flowed and cries in heaven. This act will always be associated with the name Karl. So now, you, bourgeois of Germany, acclaim the savior of the fatherland. One thing remains to be settled. What was actually done, apart from the butchery, to save the fatherland in the weeks ever since? What has been done to save and liberate Germany? Is this terrible crisis over? Ha ha! The German fatherland has been saved. Hitler, as you say, but cannot prove, would have led it into the abyss. But Ritter von Kahr has saved it. So, what did he actually do? Well, he threw all the fighters' leaders into jail, crippled the movement, and made Volkshofer a minister again. That is the sum total. You have peace and order backed up by machine guns, and we congratulate you. Redacted in Rome are laughing. Once again, a truly German government has been prevented, and there are nothing more to fear. Dr. Heim once said that come Christmas 1923, the Völkisch movement will no longer exist. Is that so? You bourgeois helped to do that. One day the German Volk will bring you to account for it. Not only Karl, Lossow, Sicer, but all of you. You will all be required to answer, were you prepared to sacrifice your life for the liberation of Germany? And you will be judged, as God is my judge, and you will receive justice, pitiless and just. This court and later history too will then rightly and justly know upon which truly worthy figure to bestow the title of Savior of the Fatherland. In another memorandum of mine of 19 November 1923, I wrote about the Fatherland Front of National Unity as follows. The old women of male gender complain nationalist men who want one and the same thing are separated today into two camps. A terrible thing. These misled people must surely see that they have been misused by false leaders, etc. It is important to stand together against the enemy in the Rhineland and Ruhr and terrible crises across the land, etc. Pardon me. First, these gentlemen, nationalists at heart, are like us. Since March 1920 in Bavaria, they have had things well under control and run the apparatus of government. They are pure people who stand in our camp. It is an unalterable fact. However, that compared to the present, the spring of 1920 was a golden age in everything, but everything is worse now than could ever have been expected. The evil socialists who are guilty of everything everywhere else are not guilty in Bavaria, for they have had no say here since March 1920. The Reich government, the French, the Entente, the socialists in the Reich, and so on, they are guilty. Quite correct. I had almost forgotten, even though it is repeated daily in Bavarian, loyal to the state of Bavaria, newspapers, and that is the first reason, gentlemen, why we can never combine with them. They say that the others are guilty. We ourselves, of course, We ourselves, of course, wanted to do something about it, but it was not possible. The most important thing is to uphold peace and order. No and no again. We can never acknowledge that. It is up to us to improve things and not keep looking at the others. It cannot go on, and something must happen, they cry. Yes, but we have to act and change things to get down to brass tacks. Let us state immediately that we, the Kampfbund, refuse to be lumped together with the so-called pro-fatherlanders, since at the present time we have nothing in common with them and do not wish to know them. In colloquial usage, there are two national camps. One is national, and ours is nationalist. The nationals see the ideal and the ultimate goal to be the restoration of the circumstances existing before November 1918, a bourgeois government with an outwardly visible Marxist influence, with proven generals and statesmen in prominent positions, ultimately a king again whom they can follow, and not an illusory monarch. A Bavaria with as many rights as possible retained, especially the predominance of the Catholic Church, peace and order as the idea of every brave citizen in the entire province. Every officer and official displaced by the revolution shall be reinstated with the former rank and commission. Perhaps later a settling of accounts with France, although this must not be spoken of openly for fear of inciting the French. In any way, we have no weapons. This sounds exactly like conservatism today. It is also not certain if the British and Americans will like the sound of it, and nationalists, those eternal warning voices and criers in the night, ought to be silent and not disturb peaceful development. There are some men of the national stamp who deliver momentous national speeches from time to time. For example, Carr, but not enough of that. So there. Everything else rests in the hands of the national government and its leaders, for which the rest of the world envies Bavaria. Briefly put, that is how national circles think. A true idol for the floral arbor. The masses, empty-minded and repeating those platitudes, parrot fashion, trust unconditionally in the national government and its leaders. The string pullers work to introduce one thing: reaction. There is nothing which can bind us nationalists to this circle. The 1918 upheaval was one of the greatest crimes, if not the greatest crime ever perpetrated against Germany, but it could not have happened if those nationals responsible for preventing it had remained at their posts. It could not have happened if the responsible representatives of the old system had not failed all along the line. Germany can never return to before November 1918. The guilty ones then, not only the revolutionaries, but them above all the others, must, if there is any justice, be punished remorselessly. Even Carr, first minister of the government, will have to answer for his behavior on the night of 8 November 1923, and for his acts in that position in which the king installed him. For 5 years, the whole array of statesmen, ministers, and so forth have been engaged in raising Bavaria up. The result has been despair and distress across the entire region. We have sunk deeper, and we, the revolutionaries, declare no return to the old system, the reaction. Neither can the tired-out statesmen and generals help us. We can only be helped by activists from all circles. And above all, the young and the frontline veterans who are prepared to fight and are filled with fanatical love for the fatherland, I say, from all circles. But turn principally to the working classes. As in earlier times, they are treated as stepchildren. Obviously, they are expected to love the fatherland, yet everybody is astonished if they follow Marxist gods when they see that nobody is interested in them. We want the workers as our brothers and win them for the fatherland. When they finally belong to us, then we shall know that we have loyal and upright friends, and that the other tasks which confront us can be resolved easily. The new Germany will not be run from rooms occupied by privy councillors and their excellencies. The middle classes must become accustomed to that. The German Volk will not want ossified councils, damaging Germany from the ground up in the same way the old ones did. We have no interest in what is being done in Berlin, Paris, London, etc. but we shall say this, and that needs doing, and therefore must be done. To the task. Will what happened in Spain, Turkey, and Italy also befall us? Are we really the pariahs of the world, which even the nationals will have us believe with their whining? No, and again, no. We want Germany to be saved. We know that it will have to be fought for. Up, we will fight. We know that it is up to us alone, for our aim is something quite different to that which the bourgeois and the nationals want. We want to frighten them all out of their lassitude. We want to create a new, young Germany, free from all the dross of the recent past, free for all levels of societies and callings, but above all, clean and honest. This country will not be ruled by ingenious so-called prudence, but by the tremendous will to lead Germany back to might. To the Reichskriegsflagge, I send the following message. Comrades of the RKF, victory was denied to us by the first revolt of the Völkisch Freedom Movement on the anniversary of the 1918 November uprising. We have lost a battle, but not the cause. On 9 November 1923, the RKF, together with its comrades from the NSDAP in Oberland, has had to surrender its weapons. Together with its comrade in arms, it has been disbanded and outlawed by Commissioner General von Kahr. Two noble comrades sealed their loyalty with death. The unforgettable stormtroop leader, Lieutenant Casella, from amongst the best of us, and friend Faust. They shall bear witness before God that there is still a young Germany which is prepared to make the highest sacrifices for the liberation of the fatherland. To you all, dear comrades, I thank you for your loyalty, discipline, and bravery, which you, mindful of your oath, upheld in the darkest hours. Our heavily armed opponents make note of this. Our shield of honor gleams more brightly than ever. My pride in you, comrades, leaves me happy behind the walls of prison into which I have been thrown. 14 November 1923. We came under attack in government material and outpourings of car press. Common libel was no bar to them. Kampfbund officers were falsely accused of receiving enormous payments, some in foreign currencies, and unfortunately many officers' associations fell for the story and broadcast it at assemblies, while those defamed were in prison and unable to defend themselves. The people were not deceived, recognizing that of the ambitious clique, no one sought advantage for himself. Prussian Ludendorff has also been conquered by the hearts of the people in his chosen state of Bavaria. On 9 November, when the German compatriots turned on their brothers, he trod the path between warlord and leader of the people. The people knew that the action had been prevented, which would have been a blessing. The intellectuals of the bourgeoisie were happy to be spared the aftermath, along with Kahr's statesmanlike response. This segment of society, which specializes in measuring all things objectively, will always be found on the side of those who make no demands of them for personal involvement and sacrifice. They are the people who, when the cry goes out for volunteers, stand aside to let the volunteers through. The common denominator between the 1918 November Revolution, the Republic of the Councils, and 9 November 1923 is the cowardice of the middle class and literati. The state of today is a direct descendant of the so-called age of Kaiser Wilhelm, with one difference. The requirement to serve the colors incumbent upon the citizens of those days has been abolished. The state of 1919 pretended to be a military state. Unfortunately, it was not, but nevertheless demanded of the population only limited personal service. The state after 1918 is a night watchman state, which makes no military demands of its citizens. It never speaks of personal obligations, only of so-called rights, and therefore its citizens love it and are very opposed to any change. For low-grade people, it is the ideal. The decisive factor for them is that no demand is made of their persons. These are the visible signs of the ruin brought by democracy. Since Bismarck, Germany has not been led out but only administered. Kaiser Wilhelm II tried to lead Germany, but could not overcome the resistance. His government dispensed with having leaders under him. The supreme leader can only lead if he is prepared to tolerate leadership qualities in those alongside him. The pre-war army was still the only school which trained leaders who wanted responsibility. It no longer exists. The democratic principle of the state is the grave of leadership. An analysis by numbers shows the reasoning. If we divide the men who survived the war into three groups, the good, the moderate, and the poor, every front soldier knows that the highest percentage of those who fell came from the good group, less from the moderates, and least from the poorest type of soldier. If the ratio of these groups was before the war was 1-1-1, today it is probably 1-3-4, with the poorest quality preponderating. Can this be seriously contested? I doubt it. Only as a result of this imbalance, nothing to do with birth or social standing, but with personal value, the lowest quality grab mastery. It cannot be a coincidence that women can obtain privileged positions in this state. Women are to the forefront not only in business but in political life. With the exception to date of the votish parties, all the others send women as deputies to both parliaments. Mulier Taciat, the women should be silent, no longer has validity. Women hold forth and men knuckle under. Yet this equality and submission by men to women is considered very manly today. They make fools of themselves. At the time of national greatness and might, and in times of war, women have never been tolerated in high positions. It is hard to imagine that Alexander the Great or Frederick the Great, a Caesar or Napoleon, a Prince Eugen, or Charles XII of Sweden would have bent to their influence. These men were the great warlords of all time, shining examples as leaders of their people. But they were only unvarnished war heroes, and not enlightened rulers of an ideal Reich in beauty and dignity, who appear bearing the palm leaf of eternal peace at the League of Nations. In this sea of cowardice today, Germany has at the helm those men it deserves. Only in this state can the redacted assume the position he holds today. In a state in which heroes must hold their tongues, it is the traitors who speak. At a time in which manly ideals are no longer valid, in a seat which values unmanly and womanly virtues, which knows only reconciliation and eternal peace, and suppresses the martial and fighting spirit, the redacted will always be able to obtain a masterful position for his character and designs. Here my opinion diverges from that of the bourgeois again. Not the redacted are guilty of everything, but we are guilty of letting the redacted dominate. I am scarcely one to oppose the redacted dispassionately, or to lack decisiveness to lead the struggle against redacted mastery. It is my opinion, however, that the struggle against the redacted will proceed in a false and inappropriate manner. And you all do know what I'm saying when I say redacted, right? I'm being very careful. One cannot combat the redacted by imitating and exceeding his failings. The redacted can only be overcome by our having different and superior business practices. I am therefore more for practical anti-Semitism than for an insipid chatter and repulsive hypocrisy. Not too bad. Redacted mastery will no longer exist when German men in Germany speak and deal in German. Germany will heal when it is German again. The principles of life today are not German, but redacted. The governing principle that binds the citizens of the state together is not to serve, but earn. Vote and state are today opposing concepts. There is no talk of all power coming from the people, as the Constitution so nicely puts it. The state today is a limited company owned by moneyed powers, which do not show themselves for accountability, but issue their orders from behind the scenes and dominate untrammeled. The moneyed powers in earlier times used the sword to obtain their objectives. Today it is not necessary. Thus, conscription had to disappear because it conflicted with business. The army preaches service to the Volk and fatherland. This is not good for business. And the army teaches the soldier to understand the social structure of the state. This too is against the interests of the businessman. The officers and officials of former times served not for their pay but for honor. Therefore, when the revolution came, the officers had to be degraded by having their rank insignia and cockades torn off in order to silence these patrons of social order. This cleared the way for today's state. It is not lost glory, but loss or damage to money and goods, which awakens nowadays pity in the people. Hannibal's speech to his beguiled people 200 years before the Christian era holds good in modern Germany. You should have cried when they took our weapons, burned our ships, and the foreign war had failed. This is the wound we shall die of. When the weapons were taken from the conquered Carthage and left it from then on defenseless and helpless among the many armed peoples of Africa. Nobody sighed. Now you cry when your taxes have to be paid from your own means, but not when the state is carried to its grave. How much I fear that today you have cried only over the most tolerable evil. Carthage listened as little to the voice of its warlord and leader as Germany heeds the warning voice of the most devoted people today. In the year 146 BC, the Romans razed Carthage to the ground. 50 years after their defeat, the Carthaginians disappeared from history. Not money and goods, only struggle and the restoration of our honor can preserve us against the fate of Carthage. The existence of a state, says Treitschke, is implicit in its being able to enforce its will with physical force. The state without armed forces is no state at all. The intelligentsia of the bourgeoisie, the middle classes, and the men of letters are the yardstick for all things. These clever, thinking, and mature citizens understand the coup was 1. Badly prepared, 2. Would have broken down at the latest by the Bavarian border, and 3. Foreign nations would not have approved of it. As to point 1 above, Hitler's coup was at least well prepared as the one envisaged for a few days by Kahr. Both Hitler and Kahr included the Bavarian armed forces in their planning. Agreement had been reached with the documents of the Reichswehr and state police after detailed discussions. The documents, of course, are not available, but obviously an uprising against the armed forces, this is against the Reichswehr and state police, was never intended. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry could not be led into the secret beforehand. Thus many circles were taken by surprise and knew nothing of the detailed preparations. Those who had to know knew at the right moment. Since 90% of people cannot keep a secret, a leader must often decide against disclosing sensitive information, even where that is necessary, where the need for absolute security of the information demands it. As to point 2 above, I quote an extract from a report regarding a Berlin Department of State, which would have been of decisive importance for the success of the operation. I was told that on 8 November everything was ready for the Hitler coup, and that it would certainly have succeeded if Kahr and company had not been absolute, and put their own welfare above that of the fatherland. In Berlin, all those official circles who needed to know knew. Furthermore, the advance of the northern border of Bavaria under Captain Erhard not only kept to the timetable, but the public will not be unaware that certain brigades and units were on the march in northern Germany on 9 November. What more can I say? As for point 3, I am at a loss to understand how a large part of the German public can concern itself with such a worthless and shameful consideration. At a push, I can accept that there are people who cannot make the pro-fatherland cause their own, and who preferred to have the agreement of the French before making any move. What I cannot understand, however, is that in a matter exclusively pertaining to our domestic affairs, which has nothing at all to do with foreign countries, nor can in any any way be perceived to be in some way a breach of the Treaty of Versailles, we are supposed to worry whether foreigners beyond our borders like it or not. It must be said that to our shame, not only that is the case, but that Germany itself threatens to go along with this crazy point of view. These are the fruits of years of intrigue by the pro-international parties, that all German domestic questions must be looked at from the point of view of how the Entente is going to view them. To address any further words to this abominable and contemptible argument is superfluous. Democratic Germany celebrated its birth on 9 November 1918, based on the model of and at the bidding of the Western democracies, and worships all their gods, in particular everything in the land of that Democrat Woodrow Wilson, honored as a saint, is a stainless gospel. Perhaps one should review what the American Secretary of State had to say about the Sacco Vanzetti affair in August 1927, when some of the great powers, including the Pope, pleaded for the two anarchists to be amnestied, and thus put their fingers in the American pie. If needed, a defeated people against whom to make our comparisons, then we might recall how, after their defeat in 1871, the French themselves behaved. Therefore, it is quite wrong to cast sidelong glances to see what foreigners think about 9 November 1923. One great power of the Entente recognized the new government on the morning of that day by having an envoy convey officially the best wishes of his government. To show a humorous side to things, it is worth adding that the envoy was a member of the enemy state delegation held temporarily by Kampfund troops on the night of 8 November as a result of a regrettable misunderstanding. This kind of incident, unavoidable during revolutions, will make the anxiety-monger's hair stand on end when he thinks of the terrible misfortune and awful consequences which might have resulted if something had gone wrong. Upon closer observation, we see that the contention that the Hitler coup collapsed before the shootout at the Feldern Hall is false. The fact is usually overlooked that Hitler derailed the coup planned by Kahr. The Völkisch people were to go along with the latter. They were to be Kahr's poodles, and then finally betrayed. The facts are there for all to see in the report of the inquiry by the Bavarian Parliament on December 1927. The Kahr coup fell under the wheels of the wagon because of Hitler's move on 8-9 November 1923. Thus, we have the explanation for the unspeakable rage and persecution of Hitler's followers. Bavaria's rich history was added to by the sad chapter of betrayal of 9 November 1923. It is a coincidence that the Bavarian state, which is one of the most German, has personalities wandering around who are the puppets of un-Bavarian and extra-Bavarian forces. A comprehensive study of the activity of Royal Governor Kahr must lead one to the conclusion that under him legal concepts were to have been changed fundamentally, and that in many areas Kahr had practically unprepared and enabled the separation of Bavaria from the Reich. Here information is available, not clearly explained by the Fuchs-Machhaus trial, which places certain preparations by Pinninger, Kahr's trusted aide, in a particular light. I am thinking here, for the example, of the special coal supply for Bavaria. The respect and veneration for Prussian Ludendorff was not coincidence. The puppet masters did not want to overlook the mainstream. Those particular white-blue inhabitants of Bavaria who live in a dream world which reckons time from 1866 backwards, the horizons of these strange racial brothers of ours were accurately described by a fellow Bavarian as being those of three races. First, Bavarian; second, the rascals of east of Salzburg; and third, the Prussians, anybody north of the River Main. A certain line of the Bavarian statesman places value on reviving these queer ideas. When one says Prussia, the whole Reich outside Bavaria is meant. Kahr is a person unable to escape this influence fully, in contrast to leaders of the independence movement and the counter-revolt on 9 November 1923 defended the Reich idea. We nationalists love our homeland Bavaria passionately, but our fatherland is Germany. The ruthless and unconditioned struggle with which our movement fought to keep Bavaria in the Reich and against independence in every form awoke the hate and persecution of those who want to break up the Reich. Admittedly, this hate for the Volkisch movement was not limited just to Bavarian separatist circles, but the violent rejection of the Volkisch movement arises from its revolutionary aims, to which those desiring a return to the old state of affairs are fiercely opposed. The reaction had to harness the Volkisch brigades for its own purposes, but not as Confederates. The young, ardent independence movement has neither an interest in the reinstatement of that state and throne which abdicated their duties in November 1918, nor desires a rebirth of circumstances which provoked the November 1923 revolt. As a monarchist myself, I reject in indignation the idea that a false system such as Carr's brainchild could claim for itself a royal governorship. It would instead give the monarchist idea the coup de grace. This system, which retreated step by step until finally gave up and spawned November 1918, will not last. This is my firm belief, and must finally collapse. Its repeated betrayal of the young independence movement can only hasten its demise. Social democracy does not have the power or strength to set aside the old system, and lacks the ethical preconditions. The Volkisch movement alone is in a position to abolish the system. The bourgeois view of the world drives a person when he enters life from school away from life and Volk and towards bourgeois society. Therefore, it cannot give the worker pride and belief in Volk and fatherland. School and state do not raise young Germans as nationalists, but as patriots. The patriot is only too easily intoxicated by gestures and words. The nationalist recognizes only deeds. We must refuse to be weighed down by the bourgeois and patriotic view of the world. We are neither bourgeois rightists, nor, in the modern vernacular, national. We are racial Volkisch nationalists. We are German nationalists, but not fascists. Interesting. German soldiers need no foreign role models, certainly not from amongst the Latins who failed in their alliance to Germany. That is not a condemnation of Mussolini. German rulers want praise from abroad. Everybody hates Mussolini, which on its own proves that he is a statesman of his people. In Germany, we need no Mussolini. We have examples enough in our own freedom fighters. On 9 November 1923, there was on the one hand idealism, ardent love for the fatherland, inspiration, courage, determination, candor, and honesty in a nutshell, young Germany. On the other hand, sobriety, doubt, reservation, breach of one's word of honor, breach of one's oath, scheming and inducement, in short, the desperate attempt of a dying lineage to cling on to power. On the one side, selfless fighters for a sacred idea. On the other, besides men who did their duty with gritted teeth, politicians looking for an advantage amongst their followers, people in it for the money, people happy to earn their money or win their spurs, fighting bravely against their German brothers, waverers of variable conditions, opinion jugglers of extraordinary proportions. Not even the most subtle enemy argument has been able to convince me that one must betray the people to save the state. Neither can I espouse the idea of those people who place Volk and fatherland in the same basket as the government in power at the moment. Nevertheless, the Bavarian government misses no opportunity to boast. Lest it be forgotten that in Bavaria we had a nationalist government since 1920. On 9 November 1923, I was still an active officer of the Reich Army, even if I had requested in writing to resign my commission. I have a special outlook on the Reichswehr and state police for that reason. I remain a soldier and nothing else. My heart and soul belong to the army. In my defense speech, the People's Court, I referred to the armed forces in worthy terms with regard to their conduct on 9 November 1923, which many of my Reichswehr comrades found a bitter pill to swallow. This was not done to foul the reputation of the movement, to which I have prided myself in belonging since its inauguration, nor to injure comrades whose friendship and esteem I have treasured even after that date. I spoke in that vein simply because I knew how many excellent men in those ranks of the Reichswehr and have decided to remain. My words were exclusively the outflowings of a concern I have regarding the development of the Reichswehr in New Germany. It seems to me a paradox that the Reichswehr leaders should want to continue the old army traditions by keeping the famous regimental names, but do away with the soldierly spirit. Here I interpolate a short review about the development of the Reichswehr. The basic source of recruits in 1919 were the Freikorps, idealists and ardent nationalists. They overthrew the Spartacists and fought for the restoration of constitutional circumstances. Once this was achieved, there was no further use for them. Others came and replaced them. The rulers no longer wanted the will to fight, but a Reichswehr loyal to the Constitution of the Republic. Then, in the Ruhr in 1920, nationalist fighting brigades were needed to drive out the Reds. They were to fight until the whistle blew, providing protection and security for the government of the moment. The job completed, they were sent home and abused in the most reprehensible way by having their Freikorps disbanded. The insurrections in Upper Silesia did not shake the throne of those men whose symbol today is prohibited by the law of the protection of the Republic. There was no need for official intervention here because German nationalist volunteers would fight the Polish robbers without further ado and were therefore tolerated gratefully. In the Ruhr in 1923, when the French and Belgians invaded, it was left to individuals to sacrifice their lives and freedom for Volk and fatherland. They were abused, betrayed, sold out, and shot dead. The Reichswehr the instrument of the Constitution, was never involved. All nationalist activity within the army was unwelcome and forbidden. In autumn of 1923, they had a cleansing of the Reichswehr. Nationalist officers and men had to hold their tongues and obey. Discipline demanded unconditional subordination to the will of the government. Servicemen swore their oaths to the Constitution and were paid by the Republic. The way I see it, an oath sworn to the Constitution, that is, to a document, is unnatural. You can swear an oath to a man in the same way that you can follow him into battle, but you cannot really follow the Constitution in a battle. Thus, it was easy to withdraw the Bavarian division from the Reich Army. It swore an oath to defend Bavaria, and the Bavarian state guaranteed its pay. Along came 8 November, the day of the nationalist uprising, which planned to take the Reichswehr along with it. To whom the Bavarian Reichswehr had sworn its oath of allegiance, we could not determine. We hoped they would be on our side. When the state gave the order to fire, the German Reichswehr and state police fired on us. What a change from 1919 to 1923. Later, I tried to be more just towards the conduct of the army and police, which had been subjected by the Bavarian government to intolerable strain. I was unable to do so. If anything contributed to it at first, it was praise from Red and similarly inclined press organs. When a newspaper of the status of the Münchener Post expressly praises soldiers for their loyalty and love for the fatherland, that is a particular twist. This should give cause to the Reichswehr to reflect where its leaders are taking it. The Bavarian general who ordered the Reichswehr to act against the fighting brigades, one of the saviors of the fatherland, proudly declared later that he had put down the coup because the enemy stood on the borders. He should have said, because the enemy is standing on our borders, I will not fire on our citizens. That was what another general promised, though he was not Bavarian, but Napoleon Bonaparte. I had to express what I thought was damaging. If I did so, then it was not my intention to harm the Reichswehr, but to improve it. I was totally opposed to the wage-earning servicemen who would reduce the army to a school, the school of military warfare and center of the nation's will to fight, to a welfare institution. The curse of the civil service has always been that kind of employee who sees it as a job and bread for life. Potter called these people whores in office. In an address to officers of Police HQ, he once said that he divided his subordinates into 2 classes, officers and wage earners. Officers were men who follow the path of duty unerringly, and wage earners. It was always the privilege of the officer to place economic interests behind those great ideals which his station in life directed him, and without much with his profession could not exist. If the army is not led by such officers, by what but by well-paid Reich Army officials, by wage earners, it will not be capable of doing justice to those ranks reserved to it. For a man will die for ideals, but not for his wage packet. One seldom finds a red press article which does not make the point that the army is paid by the Republic. This stupid twaddle, copied by one monkey after another, must be fiercely opposed. The present officer corps is not paid from the pockets of the Republic dignitaries personifying the Republic any more than the Imperial or Bavarian officer corps was paid for the privy purse of the military governor. Now as then, the money comes from taxation, although I doubt if the greater part of the tax-paying public is very delighted with its Republic. Therefore, not the Republic, but the German taxpayer pays. In particular, the retired officer drawing of his pension has a legal claim on the German state because it retained a proportion of his salary as a serving officer for this purpose. I would avert that the Republic's rulers keep their hands on the pension found not from love of humanity and a noble sense of what is right, but rather from the more astute viewpoint, namely that the pensions are the best guarantee of peace and order. The greater the pension for the high and higher dignitaries of the monarchy, the less temptation to gamble with politics. I mention this only in passing. It changes nothing about the basic position of the officer with regard to economic interests. In the spring of 1928, the governing parties of the Reichstag, for whose favor the Reichswehr is always concerned, set the scene for the so-called Phoebus scandal. Reichswehr Minister Gessler decided to leave the stage before the spectacle arrived before the public gaze. A department of his and Reichswehr ministry had been salting away monies on a grand scale, and several million marks could not be accounted for. Not too shocking in the age of General Dawes and Yudko Barmat. The unusual thing here, and the reason why it all went wrong, was that the money had been used to support pro-fatherland operations, and the departmental head responsible, Captain Lohmann, had kept his hands clean. Therefore, the Langen, Hegermann, and Bauer party comrades fell like wild animals upon the unhappy officer, a stranger to the achievements of the revolution. Why should I mention this here? Because it proves that officers raised as soldiers are no use as businessmen, and on the other hand, the time has come when blameless officers in high positions in the army can do business. The blame here is not with the officers who were the scapegoats, and was obviously put to grass somewhere afterwards, but with a system which is prepared to betray the steadfast principles of what was once the best army in the world. It is probably the duty of army leaders to ban the spirit and mentality which runs counter to its purposes. I must add one thing here. The conduct of the Reich Army representatives in the so-called Memoirs political murder trials of 1928 was anything but the creed of heroic behavior, loyalty, and camaraderie to the last. The name of General Pavels, as a typical representative of the Republican Reichswehr authorities, will always be associated with this organized persecution of Germans and betrayal of comrades. The general may be a reliable Republican, I do not dispute that, but a soldier? Would the Volk think that this was a soldier? Would Napoleon have said of him, "This I recognize as a man"? I do not think so. The fear which arises in the light of these observations, that for the time being considerations of utility take precedence over traditions of status, is difficult to dismiss. Alongside this concern, it also seems to me that officers are being retained by the Reich Army for, let us say, grounds of prestige. The officer corps must be stainless beyond doubt. To allow Lieutenant Braun, whom I referred previously regarding his actions on 9 November 1923, to remain in the army despite his behavior, ran counter to this requirement. From this point of view, in my speech of justification at the trial, I warned about the choice between loyalty and pay. Commissioner General Ritter von Kahr said in evidence, the Reichswehr is the instrument by which communism can be suppressed. This statement proves that in the debate on the purpose of the army, the pro-national Bavarian government is in full agreement with the democratic right government. Sorry, folks. The fear which arises in the light of the observations that for time being considerations, the Reichswehr is the instrument by which the is from full agreement. Accordingly, it is also understandable that to put down the Volkisch uprising on 9 November 1923, two apparently opposite poles, which I can best identify as Gessler and Matt, find themselves united as it were. That should not obscure the fact that the Bavarian state government, after reabsorbing the Bavarian division into the Reich Army, was allowed which, as we know, followed on 9 November, which wanted greater independence for the Bavarian Reichswehr under the Constitution. For appearance's sake, they were at odds. In reality, they were one. The statement regarding the purpose of the Reich Army, to which the statesman soldier, never at the front, Carr gave voice, must be very sharply criticized. The army is not a force of night watchmen. The suppression of communism is as little the mission and purpose of the Reichswehr as Carr's big stick policy against the Volk. May God protect the Reichswehr against a repeat of 9 November 1923. Never again must it be the purpose of its existence to hold down and shoot down German Volkisch citizens, be they radicals of the right or left. The Reichswehr will and must see its mission as being the maintenance of the watch on the borders and the preservation of the proud legacy of the glorious German army until the cry goes out to all German warriors to unfurl the flags and march to the Rhine. Always remember, we'll unite the Reichswehr and nationalists again. Only this spirit will lead them to Tauroggen and Leipzig. And that is the end of chapter 17. On to chapter 18. We have got a lot. We have got a lot of stuff to read here. I almost feel it's my duty to read this, though. I really do. I feel that it is my duty, and I may have to break this up, and I may have to finish this tomorrow because we're already an hour in, and I am sleepy. So you know what? We're down to now chapter 18 and chapter 19, which we will finish tomorrow, and I will try my best to keep up the momentum that I have. As I say, my heart is willing to go on, but I think my body is not willing to push that far. So we shall finish up tomorrow. I apologize for that. I know Revolutionary Nationalist Vanguardist was like, bruh, I'm not going to watch an hour. And I don't blame you. I don't blame you, Biggin. We're going to finish it up tomorrow after I do some reading of legal ethics. We're going to finish this daggum book if it seriously impedes my balance. There you go. I'm going to keep it there. See you tomorrow, folks. Or see you today, actually. It's 12:27.